It was 2 years ago that my esteemed colleague and co-host Don was kicked to the curb by Kings Island. How's that going for him? Hello, everybody. Alongside Don Helbig, I'm Ryan Sir, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans because that's who we are and that's who we care about.
Let's kick this off by thanking our Prestige members. Let's give a special shout out to Miss Mandy, 1983, Lil Mac, 21, Brian Hauser, 330T, Logan Lipper, Aaron Bort, Jacob Fix, Damon Barnes, Stephen Horneck, Eric Grau, Ian Crawford, Dustin Jackson, Songster Smiku, Dakota Cole, Lack Ray, Galaxy B-Boy, and Medic 302. Thank you guys so much for supporting Tower Topics at the highest level. That's the Prestige level. If you want to be involved in Tower Topics, there's a link in the description. Members get early access to the videos, exclusive content, exclusive live streams, and some tiers you can get some free stuff. So hit that link if you're interested. All right. 2 years. Can you believe it's been 2 years now, Don?
You know, Ryan, it seems like it's been really a lot longer than that. And I think the reason is that once I left, I quickly moved on to a lot of other things. You know, you and I were doing the Attractions Group podcast. We started Tower Topics. I launched Theme Parks by Don, my blog there. I started to travel to other parks again. Was working with the Cincinnati Bengals. I continued to do that. Game day, PR help in that. So I stayed really busy. And around that same time, there were some life-changing things. My daughter, she got married, and then, a year and a half later, I have my granddaughter and stuff. So just so many different life events in that happened, after I left. So in a lot of ways, it seems like it's been a lot longer than 2 years since I've been there.
Yeah, and it's funny, these things creep up on us because we're coming up on 2 years of this podcast, let alone the Attractions Group. So right. Time really does fly. But let's set the stage a little bit. So you became the PR guy in 2007. It was not long after the acquisition of Paramount Parks by Cedar Fair.
Right.
But you were kind of a staple there anyway. You were known for your racer rides. You were known for, you were always at Media Day. You were at all those different events. They would always quote you in the newspapers and stuff. So when it comes down to you having that position of being the face of the park, that's a little hard to replace in terms of putting somebody in that position with that same title. A PR is kind of different from, let's say, director of marketing, food and beverage director. Like, PR is a little bit different, isn't it?
It's a lot different. And when I went to Kings Island to be to do the PR for them, it was a little unique situation because, I was uniquely qualified, for the job. My history with the park, what I had done with the racer. I had an encyclopedic knowledge of Kings Island. So it was a little bit different there where I was able to hit the ground running. But I really never looked at it as doing a job. I looked at it as just telling a story. I believed in the park. I was passionate about it, as part of the fabric of the park's history. And I think when you have someone that's, part of that fabric, they believe in the park or whatever company, you might work for, you're a big believer in it. You've lived it, you breathed it. There's something intangible there, I think, that goes missing when you're not there anymore.
Yeah, and that's, in the tagline at the top of the show, I said, like, how's that going for him? And, certain things are irreplaceable when it comes to institutional knowledge, just a passion for it. I think that's one big thing that's lacking industry-wide for a lot of people.
I never had to go to like Google, to look things up or, buy, pay to have some kind of a newspaper service where you could go back and look up old articles or anything like that. I mean, I grew up at the park. I basically saw everything, every ride that had gone in. I'd seen every show. There wasn't anything that was going to happen, or had happened in the past that I hadn't experienced. So I could just talk from experience. I didn't have to do any research or anything like that. And I think people can tell, when you're talking on camera, you're doing a newspaper interview, you're on radio talking about Kings Island or whatever park you might work for. I think those, listening, watching can tell who's rehearsed and who knows their stuff.
Absolutely. And a lot of what you prided yourself on in your time there was your successful implementation of like the storytelling aspect, So, in that regard, it was, this is what's going on. This is the story behind it. And also, in a roundabout way, this is why you should care about it.
Right.
Um, so,
And I think too, because I cared and that passion came through, it was able to get other people to care about it too, whether it was pitching the story to the media or something that was on social media that I had written and published, something on the blog. So I think there's, that credibility to it. People can see, if you're passionate about it. If you're not excited about something, there's no way to get the audience to be excited about it. So, everything I did was genuine and authentic.
yeah, you can always tell, especially when somebody didn't is doing the book report without reading the book. That's always very obvious.
Hmm.
And I think the most obvious thing is when they keep on reporting the same thing over and or
Right.
keep on saying the same thing. Like I remember, and this is also a nervous tick too, more than likely. But when we got, uh, the Kings Island antique autos, well, I don't know the full name off the top of my head. When they were on, this was after you were no longer doing the PR stuff. The person doing it was kept on repeating the line, it's going to be really fun. It's going to be
Yeah.
really fun. And that was, I don't know if there's not much like preparation that goes into that, but you can tell that it's like a nervous tick. And it's also kind of like, if like you or I, people often, like when we have them as guests on the podcast, before we go live, they're always like, oh, I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous. I have never once felt nervous doing this podcast because I'm talking about
No.
something I know a lot about, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. If you're, you don't have to be the smoothest talker, but if you're comfortable with the subject matter and you've experienced it or you know what it's going to be like, it's easy to stand up on the stage and talk about it, to an audience. And sometimes, if it's foreign territory for you, it does come shining through.
Yeah, and it's almost like you're trying to sell yourself on it. It's going to be really fun. It's going to be really fun. Well, if you were a park person,
Hmm.
then you would be excited. Like this is, I mean, I don't know anybody that was mad about the antique autos. You put them in, and it's a nostalgic ride. It's a fun ride. You can do it with your family. It's a beautiful setting. It was going to be really fun. They were absolutely correct about that. But you didn't have to sell yourself on it live on television. I think that was
Correct.
always the big problem. But so when somebody like you leaves, or people with a lot of the institutional knowledge, it's more than just like a name on the org chart and stuff. It's a
Correct.
lot of the knowledge, like institutional knowledge, the loyalty, connection, like the history. It makes the park more stories and less rides and funnel cake and expensive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was, like you said at the beginning, I had a long history with Kings Island, being there almost every day in the 1980s, riding the racer. I was part of a lot of media stories that they had done during that decade. I was at all the different media events that followed, from 1990 leading up to my time working at the park. So, I still hear from, a lot of people, a lot of guests that go to the park, the associates, the news media and that. And they told me that after I left, they've noticed kind of a shift, change in the wind a little bit at the park. And a lot of it is that they just don't see that familiar face, out and about. Someone that just comes up and is asking them simple things. You're like, how's your day going? How'd you like this ride? Little things like that. And I think when I hear those kind of things, for people telling me that, there was that shift and that I'm missed in that, it tells me that, in some ways that I made a difference there. And, even if, the company, the people that were my bosses in that, um, and even someone that's still there today, they don't recognize that, the people do,
Mm.
the people that go to the park do, people that still work at the park do. And for me, I mean, that means a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you're staying involved with the park. You're staying engaged with the park, but it's on your own terms now.
Hmm. Yeah. I knew before I left that I would eventually, I wanted to launch my own theme park blog. I liked writing the stories. I thought there was a lot of stories of other parks I had interest in, that were there to tell. I knew I wanted to do more in my social media. I had to be a little careful what I would post about if I was visiting other parks on my own channels and that, because I worked at Kings Island. I remember going to Dollywood for their Christmas event. It was 2018, 19. I came back from from that. And I was quickly reminded, you know what park you work for? Why are you touting their event? You know, they're one of our competitors for the golden ticket, and all those kind of things would be kind of, you know, brought up to me by the person I reported to. But I knew I wanted to do more of that. That's how I got started in the whole thing to begin with. You know, going to parks. I loved traveling to parks. I liked, um, you know, experiencing the different roller coasters, the shows at different parks, the history, nostalgia of other parks. So that part of it was something that I knew I wanted to get back to. So it was an easy transition going from working at Kings Island to just doing my own thing, and, you know, getting back out there and traveling and doing all of that. But I think too that I felt that there was still a lot left in the tank. You know, I still had stories to tell. I still think I had something to give back to the industry. You know, to fans of Kings Island, to fans of Cedar Point, you know, Holiday World, Dollywood, and that. You know, that's how it kind of evolved to what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I mean, you've okay. Let's go ahead and plug it, Don.
Well, it's not like I said. For me, it wasn't the end when I left Kings Island. I looked at it. It was kind of the
It
beginning.
was the next. It was the next.
Yeah, the next chapter. You know, it was easy.
But I mean, obviously, local to us here, your focus is on Kings Island, uh, Kentucky Kingdom, Holiday World, Dollywood, and
Kennywood.
Kennywood. And four of those five parks really appreciate what you do. They really do. So it's nice to get that kind of recognition. Um,
It is, but that's not why I do it. I mean, it's just that I'm passionate about, you know, those parks, the attractions they have there. You know, I've become a big foodie fan, so I love, you know, touting the different foods and that these parks have to offer. So it all comes easily for me. You know, nobody's telling me what to post or how to post it or anything like that. It's, you know, it's all being done, like you said, on my own terms.
exactly. So what made you want to start working at Kings Island initially?
You know, it was opportunity. People asked me if it was a dream job. No, it was a dream opportunity. It was something that was always kind of in the back of my mind. It was how I got interested in doing PR in the first place. 1980s, you couldn't help but gravitate toward, you know, maybe doing that as a career when, you know, you're around the people that I was as often as I was in the 80s. And I'm talking about the really the greats, the PR greats at Kings Island in their history. I'm talking Bill Mefford, Ruth Voss, Carolyn Bowes, Susan Lomax, Steve Edwards, you know, all those people that I was around all the time. And Ruth kind of put that bug in my ear that, you know, maybe this is something you should look at doing. You know, you love the parks and that. There's just a natural way about you in terms of how you talk about the park and that. So maybe you should look at it. But I thought about it, but it wasn't, didn't seem realistic because you know, at the time there was, you know, all the different stories out there about me riding the racer. And the first thing, you know, if I was to apply at a park or something, you know, oh, coaster enthusiast, we're not going to hire that guy, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So there was that stigma that was with it. And I understood that, you know, so I never really tried to do it in the early part of it. You know, I knew I had to go somewhere else first and get the credentials as a PR person. I always wanted to be a professional sports broadcaster. That was the goal growing up. And in order to be able to do that, you had to be able to justify your existence doing other things. And I was fortunate to get involved with the Cincinnati Cyclones when they came to town in 1990. So I got a PR role with them while I waited for a broadcast opening to happen. And I had a merchandise background, so I was able to, you know, wear those two hats to justify my existence. So I knew I was building, you know, the credibility in terms of, you know, having a PR career. I wasn't just somebody that rode a roller coaster. Now I want to work there. So, you know, I was doing that. But I just thought, you know, when that opportunity came about, I had talked to them. I think it was 1999. It was around the time, you know, right before Jeffrey Siebert went there. In fact, that you know, the timing wasn't really right. There were some, you know, some different things. You know, my father wasn't doing really well, and there was talk of, you know, Paramount selling the parks and all that. So the timing wasn't really well to, you know, right to kind of really look into that. So I didn't really, you know, think much about it. And as my career, you know, had advanced in that with hockey, I was, you know, moved around to a couple different states in that, and I was in Albany, New York. I had gone there, you know, maybe 8, 9, 10 months before, and I got a call from Kings Island, you know, asking if I'd be interested in their PR position. I had known that, uh, you know, Maureen was the PR person at that time, Maureen Richmond, that she had resigned, and I didn't even give it a thought to apply for it or anything, and they just wanted to test the waters that Bill Mefford was doing some freelance consulting work with them, and he had mentioned the Craig Ross and Matt Schaefer, who was the marketing director. I had worked with Matt with the Cincinnati Mighty Ducks. He said, why not Don? He'd be a natural. He'd be able to hit the ground running. Matt didn't think I'd have any interest in leaving hockey. And Bill Mefford said, well, you don't know unless, we reach out and talk to him. So Matt said, well, go ahead and just ask if he'd be interested. So, I just thought nothing ventured when I heard from Bill, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And, um, so I thought, well, why not? If they want to talk to me, I'll talk to them. So I came in, I met with Craig Ross, who was the VP of marketing, great guy. Met, with Matt and the general manager at the time, Greg Scheid. It was a really good conversation, very open conversation. A lot of questions were asked, like, how would you have handled the Son of Beast situation? And, other things like that. They were having trouble with one of the stations. What would you do to kind of improve that relationship? So, one of the things Craig Ross told me, he said, when I heard you might be interested in this job, he said, I was excited about it because you'll be able to hit the ground running. This park, you're not going to have to spend time educating yourself about the park or the industry. So there was a lot of positives to it. And then, went back to Albany, and a couple of days later, they reached back out with the offer. And, I thought, if not now, when? But it was about the opportunity. It was also going to be the people I was going to get to work with: Craig Ross, Matt Schaefer. There was a lot of people that I knew, from the 80s that worked there. And while there was maintenance, operations, food and beverage, entertainment, so it was kind of like, I knew who was in those offices. So it wasn't like I'd be starting a new job somewhere and had to be introduced to everybody. So it was about the people that I was going to get a chance to work with too. There was a lot of talented people, and I kind of thought it would be great to be a part of that, and let's see what happens. And I didn't know if I'd be there for 2 years or 10 years, 15 years, whatever it was. Ended up being 17 years, but that's what made me interested. Just really that opportunity to see what I could do. I had proved myself in hockey, and it was just something that, okay, here's a different industry. Can I take what I know on the PR side? Can I take it to this industry? And does it translate there? And it did.
So for a lot of major parks, the PR guy is like the face that runs the place. Ones that come to mind are, just as a reference pointer, like Jeffrey Siebert and Tony Clark and
Right.
people like that. Uh, so when did you start to feel like you were not so much an employee of Kings Island, but part of the experience to some people?
Well, I never really looked at it as I was part of the experience. It didn't really feel any different than when I was a guest. When I would walk around the park, I'd still run into a lot of people that I knew. So it really didn't feel like, there was anything different other than now I was, instead of paying the park to be there, they were paying me to work there, so nothing really changed on that front. It was still the same thing, seeing people and talking to them, asking how their day's going. I just couldn't hop in the ride and ride with a lot of people like I could before. But other than that, it really wasn't that different. It didn't feel, other than, at the beginning we had to wear the ties and that, but other than I was in a uniform, and, it all felt the same as it did throughout the 80s, really.
So is there like a project or an event or something that you're most proud of in your time there?
I'd have to say the motorcycle jump by Robbie Knievel, and there was a variety of reasons for that. I mean, that was a big time event. Such a short notice on that. We had less than 2 weeks to put that event together, and that was going into my first real full year. Was the first real big thing that I had to do. The year before there wasn't it was Firehawk had just opened, Son of Beast was reopening, and that, but those were the easy, just get the word out and keep it sustained, that what those things were all about, that they were going on. But with the Knievel jump, there was getting the media tour set up for him to go to all the stations in Cincinnati and Dayton, a TV, radio, set up a media event at the park for people to come out and talk to him, set up the satellite truck so he could do interviews, pretty much coast to coast with what he was going to be doing at Kings Island. So there was a lot involved there in a short time to get it done. But also the day of, leading up to the event, just really showed me what working at Kings Island was going to be all about, that it was, really a team effort, because everyone at the park had every department had some kind of a role in making this event a success. So, it was certainly a one team effort. And I think that's why that event really stands out to me, is just how everybody, dropped what they were doing, came together as one to help out the marketing department to make sure that this event was a success.
Do you have a particular day that sticks out to you that's like a favorite in your time there?
Yes. One that sticks out to me was July 7th, 2007, my first week there uh, in the PR role. And there was an event, A Kid Again had their annual outing. And I had not heard, I heard of Make a Wish and all that. So it was the same kind of a, concept in that, the families with kids with life threatening illnesses, but I had not specifically heard of A Kid Again. And just seeing that day, a couple thousand, families, and what that day meant to them, what it meant to the kids who had those life threatening illnesses, but not only them, but also like the siblings, the brothers and sisters. Uh, you know, you don't think about that until you get to really experience an event like A Kid Again and see that not only is the child with the life threatening illnesses who has to stay maybe inside most of the time or can't go out and do things, not only are they really impacted and the parents are impacted, but it also impacts the brother, the sisters, and that, because they really can't go out and do a lot of things either. So to see the whole families together, just having that best day of the year, I think that's the one. You mentioned one day, Ryan. I think that's the one that stands out to me, because you start to realize how fortunate you are in your own life when you see all the families in that. So that one stuck with me for sure. And I wanted to do everything I could from that point on to help raise awareness for A Kid Again. And it was always one of my favorite, things every year when they were coming out. And I made sure that, I would let the media know to try to help create more awareness for them. I would, I wrote blogs every year about their annual event, post on the social channels. And it was just something that I look forward to every year was being involved with A Kid Again coming to Kings Island.
Is there like a ride or a event or anything like that that you push for that ended up being like a shining star, like a success story?
Not a ride, but the thing I always point to is the Brady Bunch coming in 2008. It was the anniversary of them doing their episode at Kings Island. I think it was 35-year anniversary. And from the time I got there, I had, even in my interview, I pitched, you need to bring the Brady Bunch actors in and do an appearance in that. I kept getting, a lot of no's, a lot of naysayers. It's been 35 years since, 30 something years since they've even been on the air. Does anyone even know who they are? It's like you would hear with the Peanuts characters. Nobody knows who they are. Why would we want to do this? I kept pushing for it. And I kept saying, hey, look, all those years I was riding the racer all the time, every day, going through the queue and that, you hear people as they passed you by and said, oh, this is the ride that was featured on the Brady Bunch and that. So I said, people still know about it. So we had a pretty good year. And again, something that was very short notice, maybe 2-3 weeks notice, the general manager came to me and he said, we've got some money left over. If you want to try your Brady Bunch thing, see what we can do, see who we can round up. Here's how much money we have. And, I reached out to the agent for Barry Williams, and he thought, what I wanted to do with kind of a, meet and greet type of day with multiple shows. And that was a great idea. He pitched it to Barry Williams. Barry liked it. Uh, Available was going to be Susan Olsen and Mike Lookinland. So it came together pretty quickly to bring them in. And it was, something I had fun, letting the media know that they were going to be there. The morning, crews all came out to do interviews and that with them. Uh, but I remember, the general manager specifically telling me, Greg Scheid, better make sure you let your friends and, family and that know that they're here. So we have some people in the building for them. Well, the first show I think was like at noon, but it was, as soon as the gates opened, you had people that were dressed in their 70s attire. They had their photo albums and that of the Brady's. They were coming from places like Pittsburgh and Detroit and Chicago, and further, specifically to see the Brady's. And uh, the line immediately, went past the front gate, past the fountains, curved around toward La Rosa's. And I remember taking a picture of it and I, texted it to the general manager and I said, here you go, naysayer, look at this for the first show. Well, unbelievable, they thought. So standing room only for the first one. There was going to be 4 shows. And he said, okay, that's one. Let's see what happens for the next couple of, well, all 4 were the same thing. So I think for me, it was, I stuck my neck out saying this is what we should do because I believed that it would be relatable to the Kings Island fan, and it was, and that it would be a success. And we brought them in again, 5 years later, and in 2013, same kind of success, with it. And I tried to do it again for the 50th, but at that point, I got met with the same thing, with the marketing team at the time that had come in. There was a lot of changeover from the earlier years when I first brought them in the first two times, and it was the same thing. Nobody knows who they are. They're old, they're this, they're that, and everything. So we never did it again. But I think for me, it just that it was a hunch. I just felt that there's that part, those intangibles again about you know being part of the fabric of the park's history, just being out there and hearing what gets talked about all the time. I didn't have to do any like research about that or how do the Brady's do when they appear other. I just knew based on what I was hearing people talk about from 1981 on, that every time I was in line for the racer, pretty much that this was something that was going to be a success, and it was.
So let's talk about your exit. Very
Yeah.
unceremonious. I was the last to know. I've come to find out. but
No, you weren't really. You weren't really.
I
But go
saw
ahead.
people posting on X about like alluding to it, and I was like, "Why are these people in such a bad mood?" And then we recorded, and you didn't tell me anything, and then you called me afterwards. but
Well,
so what actually happened that day? Like, were you surprised it was coming? Tell us about that day.
I mean, no surprise at all that was really coming based on the way things were going. A little history for everyone that from 2007 into the fall of 2017, I handled the PR in that, but they had decided they had a new, corporate VP of marketing and that, and they had this vision on how they wanted things to be set up, and uh, they felt that the five big parks were going to restructure, and they were going to have a new position that had never been available at Kings Island was a director of communications position. I had been doing both PR and social media, so early, I guess it was mid June or something. They called me in and they just said, "Hey, we're going to restructure. You're going to focus 100% now on the social media. We like what you're doing there, and we're going to hire director of communications. They're going to be your new boss." Didn't really, they kind of did the same thing with uh, the other parks too. With what was happening and with the restructure, and anyone that was in the PR role in those parks were either moved to the social side or they were moved out. So they didn't even get a chance to talk about the communication position. They had a vision for what they wanted that role to be. So I was okay with it. I was like, okay, the digital side, I had done PR at that point, 30, something years. So nothing really left to prove there. That was on paper on my resume. So it really wasn't going to matter. And if I'd stayed just kind of a straight PR person, uh, in terms of marketability, you were considered a dinosaur. I think, if I'd applied some other places, they would have said, well, does he know social media? Does he know this? Does he know, the digital side? Does he know websites and all that? So from that standpoint, in terms of making me more marketable, it made more sense to you know go fully immersed into the digital side. And I was enjoying what I was doing, and this was going to be an opportunity to really launch the Kings Island blog, do more more storytelling. It was an opportunity where I wasn't going to be the one that I'd be at a Cincinnati Reds game and something would happen at the park and I'd have to leave the Reds game in the third inning because I had to come up and write a statement and all those kind of things. So it was kind of nice from that perspective. I was enjoying what I was doing with social media. So, you get the new boss and that, and, the first couple of days, there really wasn't any, interaction with me. So I thought that was a little odd. I think they would want to sit down and talk to me about what I did, how I did it, and all those kind of things. So none of that was happening. And then, third day or whatever, I knock on the door and, I said, "Hey, just, wanted to introduce I know who you are, I'll get to you when I get to you," kind of thing. So you're already kind of like, okay, this is going to go well with it. And then, a couple months later, there's another, you know, conversation or something. And um, they just kind of mentioned to me, they said, "I was brought here to make everything that you did better." Well, we were doing everything at the pretty high level, with what I was doing. Our social media was leading engagements per post across not only the chain, but pretty much in the entire industry. We were top five or six in the entire industry with engagements per post. We were doing well with the blog. We were driving a lot of traffic to the website. PR wise, I didn't take a back seat to any other PR people out there the years I did it, in terms of getting all the earned media coverage, and not just on the layups of new rides and everything, but just finding all those stories in the park. So that was a little bit, like, it was almost like they were taking a shot, kind of, kind of thing. But then I was like, well, thinking in my mind, well, what's their credentials? Because I knew where they had been before, and there wasn't anything, you never heard about them really in the media, and the social media metrics and that weren't there. So I didn't really understand, what they were trying to say or anything, or what they were trying to do there. So it just didn't get off to a terrific start. And then, there just wasn't a lot of communication or anything, the door, their door was closed a lot, and you'd get an email every now and then about something, but there would be, stretches of days, where they wouldn't even say hi to you. So it just felt, there's a disconnect, a little odd. Didn't impact what I did, and I still went out and did my job, did it at a high level. Was still enjoying what I was doing and all that. But then, one day you get told that, you know, look, I didn't want you when I took this job, but I needed you, so I kept you around. Now think about that. If your boss, if you're listening to this, if your boss told you, I didn't want you when I took the job, but needed you, so I've kept you around. What are you going to think in that? So that kind of makes a little bit of a toxic environment, because at that point in time, I knew it wasn't a question of if I was going to get kicked to the curb. It was just a matter of when. So there really wasn't anything that I could do to change that. I just knew that, that for whatever reason they harbored, dislike for me, and they felt, threatened because of my history with the park, my knowledge of the park, my relationship with guests. Um, that was a problem, for them. And we get to, near the end of my time, we have coaster stock, and a couple of people, presented me with this big card they wanted everybody to sign, just thanking me for the event, and you could just tell by the reaction of them when that was presented that, they didn't like that. And that was everything that they had a problem with, um, that I had this relationship with all these people, and it was something that, they wanted. And as long as I was there, they were going to be in the shadow. So I would think that'd be tough for somebody, maybe. I get that. But I just wish the communication had been a little bit better, and they had, just kind of explained that a little bit more to me, like why that was a problem for them. So that's kind of what was leading up to, like near the end. And, then it ended on June 27th of 2023, 4:01 p.m.
So you did look at your watch right when it ended, right? Was that your first instinct?
Well, there was a clock in the conference room. I looked up.
Okay. So tell us about the actual conversation that happened in that conference room. I mean, you were sat down. Obviously, they had some sort of conversation with you, and then it was just like,
Yeah,
you
well,
can
I
leave.
kind of felt that it was. Yeah, kind of felt it was coming. The walls are kind of thin in the hallway, so I would hear, those conversations, like advocating for the departure and that kind of thing. So it wasn't a surprise that, it happened, but I knew that, leading up to it, there was just some odd things
Mhm.
that, for more than 5 years, 6 years, that never once was I ever asked about, anything about my family, how they're doing, or how my daughter's doing, nothing like that. And then about 3 weeks before this happened, when I was, shown the door, I start getting asked, multiple times, just to confirm the date of when's your daughter's wedding again? When's your daughter's wedding? So it was like it was intentional, that they did it the week of, kind of as the wedding was approaching, and that, it felt like that it was an intention, because there was never any conversation about my family until that. So I kind of thought that was odd, that all of a sudden now they're showing interest in my family. So, we were supposed to have a meeting to talk about the Planet Snoopy expansion. That was what was on in the meeting request and all that, so I'm supposed to be going in there with them and, a couple other people and stuff. So that time of the day comes around, 4 o'clock. I go into the room and, if you ever watched the movie Goodfellas, and, Tommy's about to get made and stuff, and he walks into the room and there's nobody in there and he just knows, oh, God. And then they whack him, so I kind of, when I walked in the room and I see, a couple of HR people and the general manager, Mike Kuntz, sitting at the table. There's an HR person from corporate on the big screen. So I kind of knew what was happening, right away. So I just, sat down, and Mike just said, Don, we're, ending your employment here effective immediately. And, they'll have the paperwork and stuff to go with you. And he gets up, heads to the door, and he just turns around and he says, you're not to reach out to anybody in the company. Then he walked out, So they're just, looking at me, and they're just like, well, sorry about this. And, here's some paperwork. And it was just, pretty quick, with it. And, maybe about a 10-15 minute, type thing. And I didn't, have anything really to say, about it. I just, told him that, I was thankful for the opportunity and that. And, I'll take a look at the paperwork and we'll get back with you, kind of a thing.
Did they give you a reason or anything like that? Or was it just cold?
No. It was just, matter of fact, straightforward. I don't know what they, even if I'd asked for a reason, I don't know that they would have provided one. I kind of knew what the reason was, why, like I said, because I felt that was coming and I would hear those conversations and stuff. So there wasn't even a reason on my end to ask, because at the end of the day, I really knew that, somebody didn't want me there, and, they finally were able to get that done, but it was okay. I was okay with it.
What were your thoughts when you drove off the property, after you had this meeting and, left?
Well, at the meeting, they, before they asked real quick, oh, we need our phone back. Give us your ID and stuff. I said, oh, do you want my name tag too? Oh yeah, we want that. So it was just kind of one of those kind of things. And then they kind of walked me out. They said they would get me things that were in my office. I didn't have much in my office. I had it pretty much cleared out from August 2019, which tells you how long I kind of felt that every day, maybe this could be the last day. I don't know. But I had a couple things left in there. I had a Beast mug. There was a presentation kind of folder that I had clippings from my 10,000th write-in that they did not give back to me. And when I asked for those items, they said they couldn't find those items in there. And I was like, well, they were on the desk when I left. Stands to reason they would still be there, but never got those items back. But they did give me a couple of, smaller things that were around. I had a couple jackets and, some things like that. But my thoughts, you said, as I left the property, what my thoughts were?
Yeah.
I as I drove off, I was really, grateful. I felt grateful for the 17 years, the opportunities that I got, the experience that I got, the people that I met, the people I became friends with, that was going through my mind. Not that I wasn't working there anymore. It was more of, just thankful for everything that happened because of Kings Island, what I was able to do. So that was my thought process, was just really, I guess the word would be grateful.
Yeah. And then you had wasn't there a set of Coney Island cards that they were trying to give away?
Yeah, that was one of the things that was in my desk drawer.
That story needs to be told. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I have an extra set of Coney Island cards.
Yeah. It was like they said they gave me everything that was in my office, which they obviously didn't, because I never got my clippings book back. But there was a Coney Island card set that was in my desk drawer, was in the top left-hand drawer, and popping up on Twitter, and my former boss is giving away this set on Twitter. I'm like, oh, I wonder where they got that from. So I sent a thing to HR about it, and I said, hey, that was in my desk drawer. You guys never gave that back to me. I'd kind of like to have that. So I got another set. They replaced it. So I don't know if it was the same set or they found another one and gave it to me, but I was able to get it back.
I guess we'll have to find out if anybody received a set from the Twitter contest.
Yes, exactly.
So
but that was just kind of odd, bold, because I knew that, oh yeah, that was in my desk drawer, But I really would have liked to have that clippings book back. But in a lot of ways, though, the clippings are one thing, but it's the memories that really matter the most.
Right. So you mentioned that Mr. Coons asked you not to reach out to anybody in the company, which
Hmm.
is probably standard procedure. I don't think that was targeted at you. Uh,
No, no, I felt it was standard.
but did anybody like within the company reach out to you like, "Hey, I'm sorry this happened," or were you blackballed? Were you blocked?
I, really don't know if there was any kind of communication not to. I do know that they didn't announce anything,
Mm,
when I left. It was just, let's just hope nobody notices kind of a thing, that it was several days, before people knew I wasn't there anymore. Some thought I was on vacation. Some thought I might be helping out another park, because that wasn't uncommon with that. Some found out that I wasn't there anymore because we talked about it on the Attractions Group podcast, but they never sent out any kind of formal um, thing, email or anything like that to let people there know, or if they did, it wasn't real widespread to let people know that I wasn't there anymore. They certainly didn't do that with, the different comms and PR teams, because, several of them told me that they never knew. They just knew I wasn't on the calls anymore, so they never knew the reason or anything. So I don't know that they would have told people, don't do it. I think it might have been assumed to don't do it. But at the same time, they took my phone, so I don't know if people tried to call or text or whatever. Um, some of them that had, were friends on Facebook or X, Twitter at the time, you did get some, I did get some messages, from them just saying, hey, sorry to hear what happened. If you need to talk or anything, here I am, that kind of stuff. So I did get a little bit of that. But I don't know if that was ever anything, mandated. I would think there's might be a couple select people that were told, don't do it. Don't reach out to him. And if he reaches out to you, let us know. So I would think there might have been a little bit of that.
yeah, because who knows what kind of? I mean, you or any recently former employee could do a lot of damage. Potentially. That's probably what they were trying to mitigate. But your former boss, definitely seemed like the kind of person that would make outlandish claims, like, I don't know, they invented the question mark or something like that. But it was kind of obvious when, I mean, I alluded to this earlier. They weren't very refined on camera. They didn't sell anybody on anything. The knowledge base wasn't there. You would have been a really good resource for that. Did they ever come to you with questions or for tips or ask how they did on it or anything?
No, no, they didn't. It was almost like they had all the answers, but didn't know what the questions were. I could have helped them for sure. I wanted to help them, but wasn't something that, I felt that they wanted my input. I think they wanted to try to distance as much as they could from me, or maybe, they wouldn't get full credit or something if it was known that they were, reaching out to me for help or whatever. But no, it just never really came about. I think it was, one of the people that I was working with at the time, when they left, they told me the only thing that they didn't really like during their time there was just seeing how, that person had, um, disrespected and undervalued me, that bothered them,
Yeah.
so, it wasn't just something that other people were noticing that. So I don't know. I mean, there was just never that time where they did that. And I think I would have been a good resource for them. I think you often, when you have a team or whatever, you want to surround yourself with the best possible people. Sometimes you want people that are smarter than you to talk to about things. I never had a problem when I was doing the PR, to reach out to a Bill Medford or a David Mant or somebody and just say, hey, here's the situation. What would you have done in this? Just to get more input in that. Be not just always have it be what I was thinking. I wanted to get other feedback and things on it, but that just wasn't the way it was.
So zip ahead to about 2 years, well, about a year later. So this was last
Hmm.
summer. You come to find out, tons of people coming to you with screenshots and
Hmm.
evidence that your replacement at Kings Island was telling people to distance from you. That if they wanted
Yeah.
to be on the media invite list or be their friend or whatever, they would have to delete you on Facebook, not interact with you, not take pictures with you. Um, you worked with them for a few months before your departure. And I always thought you guys got along well, but now they're to the point where there might be some targeting of people that are friends with you. Maybe. Yeah, but, yeah. Why do you think they're being so petty? Like, what's up with them?
I mean, yeah, there is a little bit of that, like you said, targeting, some friends and that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like you said, we got along, very well. Uh, they were a Kansas City Chiefs fan. I was a Bengals fan. That might have been the only conflict. We worked together
Mm,
with that. But I think, why they wanted to do that, ask people to distance and that. I think that's a question that really would be for them to
mm,
answer. But I think insecurity and like jealousy, I think those are kind of the root of why those kind of things happen. The people are just insecure, they're jealous or something, and then that's how they respond. So that might, to me, that's what I think plays a role into that. Why they would, want people to distance from me, because there's really no other reason why they would, why do that. I mean, it's the thing, and if you look too, uh, the things I was posting on my social channels. I had written a lot of blog articles about Kings Island, and they're all highly positive in that. So I never really understood where the animosity was, or why they wanted it to be adversarial or something toward me. I just never understood that. But that's just it's a question for them, why they went about it that way. But I continue to be positive about Kings Island, continue to be to this day. You can look at my social media, my Facebook, my X, my Instagram. I have a lot of post about Kings Island. There are a lot of history posts, a lot of highly positive posts about the experiences with food and that. These episodes we do on Tower Topics, we do bring up things that the park might not like sometimes, but we have that obligation to our listeners, the fans of Kings Island, to share what's going on with the park. But I don't know, Ryan. It's just one of those things that you just kind of shake your head sometimes, and you're like, it doesn't have to be that way, but that's the path they want to go. Then that's fine. That's their decision.
yeah, unfortunate, unfortunate. So,
Mm-hmm.
if you were there now, what would you do differently? Like, do you have any
If I
regrets?
was there now, what I do regrets, Ryan, I really don't think I would have. If you take the body of work, my 17 years there, I don't think I would have really done anything different. I think you only have regrets, if you feel you left something on the table, that you didn't do everything you could to be the best that you could be, for the park, the best you could be for yourself, and that every day that you showed up. So there's no regrets there. I mean, I think I came in every day. I gave it all I had. I felt the things that I did helped make a difference, both for the guest and both for the company's bottom line. So no regrets there.
Never have regrets.
No,
Now, a lot's changed at Kings Island
not
since
if you're giving it, not if you're giving it your all, right?
right, but a lot has changed since you left. Now at Six
Mm-hmm.
Flags Park, budget cuts are negatively impacting guest experience. Do you think you would
Right.
enjoy working there at this point if this had never gone down?
No, I don't think I would have. Um, I think first of all, with all the restructures and things that they did over the past year, I don't think that regionalizing the teams and that even though my skill level, my talents and stuff would have warranted one of those positions, I don't think they would have given me one of those positions for a couple of different reasons. But no, I don't. I don't think I would have enjoyed it, Ryan, in today's world, because I was always guest first, and you can see some of the things that's happening out in the park that from the top, the corporate level, and that it's not guest first. There's other priorities that they're trying to take care of first, and then we'll get to the guests later, kind of a thing. So that would have bothered me, that the focus had shift on who comes first. So for me, it was always the guest, and I wouldn't have been able to do it that way.
Yeah, I always thought that this you wouldn't have fit in very well. It's
No,
so
no,
structured now, and it's so hierarchical and so fatty at the top. It's not going to work. I've said that before, but
no. I mean, I was there at the right time. I was exactly what they needed at the time, and by the time that I was leaving, I wasn't what they needed. I mean, I wasn't a fit for the way they wanted to do things. So I understood that. I got that. So I don't think when you look at today's, the way it is today, based on my thought process, that no, I would not be happy if I was working there today, because I would know that we were not doing everything we could to make it guest first.
Yeah. So you work with a lot of really good people.
Mm-hmm.
So not to bust out the Wizard of Oz on you, because it is late on a Tuesday right now. And it
That's
gets
right.
a little heavy with the Wizard of Oz stuff. But Dorothy
Right.
said that she was going to miss the Scarecrow the most. I always thought that was awkward in front of her other friends.
Yes, it was. And you're going to make it awkward for me here too, aren't you?
Who is your Scarecrow? Who do you miss
My
working with the
scarecrow.
most?
Well, first, let me say, I mean, there were so many really good, talented people that I worked with. Um, Two come to mind that I had a lot of fun with. One was her name was Jennifer Hoban. She worked in the marketing department with me. She was the events person. We had a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
She was just hardworking. I think one of the best people that I've ever worked with. And the other would be Sarah Mills. She came in, and she was also the events, and kind of moved up a couple other levels in the marketing department. Uh, but she and I were kind of cut from the same cloth. We scratched and clawed for everything that we got. And I think that we had what we would always call our little adventures around the park. She and I went on a big hike, to capture the sun of East Lift Hill, coming down. I was taking the photos. She shot the video. We would help out in the park and other when they were short. We one day we helped out at Skyline Chili in Coney Mall. And I can tell you that the guests that got Skyline that day, never had more cheese,
Mm.
more sauce on their cheese conies and their 3 ways and their 4 ways than what Sarah and I were doing. It's probably the reason they never asked us to go help out there again. Uh, the dollar days, she and I would work the grill. We were cooking thousands of hot dogs. I think we might have lost as many as we cooked, rolling on the ground on that, but just a lot of fun there. But just bouncing ideas off each other, So I think when you talk about my scarecrow, it was probably Sarah Mills.
It's funny, Sarah and I had an interesting relationship where we give each other a hard time, and I always look fondly upon
Mm-hmm.
that. But one thing that comes to mind with her is you talk about, like, with a lot of your, whether it's PR or it's blogs or it's social media, you always talk about the storytelling base approach to PR or whatever.
Right,
She
right.
had her own thing because she was the events coordinator. She had it for the longest time, I think, that the position was around. And I remember she explained her theory to me one time where she said typically there's like three departments that they would need. Let's say it's like food, operations, and security. And she would talk to all three, and then often she would get a no, you know, and she would
Yeah,
try really hard to get one to say yes. And then she would use the one that said yes to leverage the other one, and then use those two, and then go to say security and be like, listen, ops and food and beverage said they're cool with this, like you'd be holding out. So it was
yeah.
she I mean, it obviously wasn't the same thing, but it's funny how everybody has their own process and how they're able to you know create success through things like
Right.
that. But that is funny. I can
No,
see.
she was really good, to work with and bounce ideas off of, and I don't know. I mean, we'd go to lunch together a lot and stuff. So yeah, I would say that she would be my scarecrow.
Was there ever a time when you were like, there was something you thought that people should know about where you were told not to put things out there or whatever? Like, is there anything you could talk about now in hindsight?
Not at all during the years that I did PR. I think they kind of knew that I knew what to put out there, what not to put out there. That common sense would prevail. So I think they had there was that trust level with me that there wasn't going to be a problem there with that. Once I went to the social media side, there were two things that I thought should have been shared with the Kings Island fans that I was told not to share with the Kings Island fans, and that was, when Firehawk and Vortex were being demolished.
Yeah.
That I thought, there was a lot of fans of those rides that, they deserve to see that, coming down. But I was told no, because they'll be talking about that. They won't be talking about, the antique car, like with Firehawks, and said, won't be talking about antique cars next year, or they won't be talking about, Orion, and it wasn't that isn't what would have happened. I think as a courtesy that, we should have been able to show that. So that's the only two times that, I was ever told, don't put that out there. Now, there were some photos sometimes that, somebody, wasn't a fan of that particular photo, but I would use it because it would get the most engagement and drive the most traffic to the website to try to sell season passes and that. That they would say, don't use that photo anymore. Okay. Well, it was their call. They didn't want me to use it. That was fine. But in terms of specifically saying, don't do it, it was just Firehawk and the Vortex, and I guess they had their reasons why they didn't want that out there. But I know there was a lot of interest in that, and there was a lot of disappointment when that wasn't shared.
Well, there would have been, but you clearly won that battle because we knew about Firehawk in the Vortex.
Yeah, you did know that they were going to be retired for sure.
Yeah,
but you didn't get to see them coming down.
Yeah, that is a bummer. I did see. Auroric, remember, they were putting all over their social media Firehawk coming down, and
yeah, they were.
Your presumably your former boss put a stop to that. And then I did see some employee, I don't know who, it wasn't somebody that I know, sent me a footage of, or didn't send
Vortex?
me, the part of the Vortex that's over by like Backlot Stunt Coaster, that coming down. Somebody had pretty low. It was, let's just say that the execution of Saddam Hussein was better quality than this.
Well, I've got a couple hundred photos of both of those rides being demolished, and maybe at some point, I'll share those, or maybe we'll do an episode on, how you take a ride down, and we'll show those. But yeah, I mean, I respected that. That's what, they didn't want that out there, and that was fine. So I just posted about other things.
So how did the PR at Kings Island differ from the PR in like pro hockey, which you'd done for like almost, did you do hockey or Kings Island longer? I think it was hockey.
Hockey. I did hockey for 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the PR for that, the media relations, end of it, you were really more media relations than overall kind of a PR person. It was, my job was more to set up the interviews, pitch the stories, and set up interviews with the coaches, the general manager, the players, conduct, after the morning skates, on game days and that, or practices, make players available for the media that would come out to those skates. After the game, I'd be in the dressing room, and I would, make the players, or get the players that the media wanted to talk to, and just make them available. Have a coach's post game press conference, set that up, and kind of manage the time so the coach wasn't going to be there all night with that. But also working with the players, I made a manual that I would, and if I would say out of the 25 guys or whatever on the team, maybe 10 read it and took it serious in that, but it helped them prepare to better understand what the media was trying to do, that they weren't out to get them, that the media's job started when their day ended. So just be available for them for a few minutes, after the game. So just kind of working with the players in that end, player appearances, setting that kind of stuff up. But I was really not so much the face, of the franchise, like you are with Kings Island. When you're the PR person, you are the one that's going to be talking on camera. You're the one that's going to be going into those studios to do those interviews, handling the print media and that. So that was really the biggest difference for me, was just, making other people available for the media to being the person that had to be available for the media.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, how badly did Cedar Fair handle your exits?
On a 1 to 10, I don't think in terms of how they did it, that there was any fail on their end. I mean, it was, pretty standard stuff, really. Just brought you in, and here's what's happening, and sign these papers, and you're on their way. I don't think there was anything wrong with that. I think in terms of where the fail came from was, they knew that this was going to be sensitive and controversial, and that once word got out, it was, depending on who they were talking to and what day of the week it was the reason that I left. Some were told I retired.
Mm-hmm.
Some were told I quit. Some were told I left without notice. Some were told, I don't know. I wasn't involved. I was on a cruise with my family when that happened.
Huh.
So yeah, yeah. So I think that part of it, all they really had to say was just, he's no longer with the company. If you want to talk to him, go ahead and talk. But there was a different, when you have those, you're telling people different things, and a lot of these people you're talking to end up in the same place, like in the enthusiast community or the season pass holders and they start having all these mixed messages and that's when things start really looking bad, more so for the park side, about how they handled it. But other than that, like in terms of, informing me and that, no problem at all. I mean, they were very professional with it. It was cut and dried. And, like I said, there wasn't any, I had no animosity, no issues. I wasn't angry. I wasn't upset. I was grateful that I had 17 years to work there.
Don, I asked our partners well, not really our partners, our friends at ChatGPT to create the actual moment that you were not kicked out of Kings Island, that you were thrown to the curb from Kings Island, and it came up with this: a man that is far more portly than you are.
Well, that's awesome, Ryan, that you created that. But it wasn't like that at all. I mean, it wasn't adversarial or anything like that. It was just, hey, your time's up, and they walked me out to my car, and that was it. And by the time I got on to Kings Island Drive, I had turned the page and was looking forward to the next things.
Yeah, I still like the image, like the mental image of
That's a
this
great
picture,
image.
though. So let's pretend.
Send me that. Send me that image. I
Of
can have some
course,
fun
you
with
can
that.
make it your you can make it your main picture on Facebook or something. Uh,
Yeah, it'd be fun.
so so if you were going to write a press release, well, okay, if somebody was going to write a press release, uh, and it was going to be about you being let go from Kings Island, what would
Mm-hmm.
it look like? Like, let's formulate that.
I think it would look, be very professional, brief, short to the point, just like you see when, a sports team, lets the manager, the head coach or something go there. I think it would have just been, Kings Island has relieved Don Helbig of his digital marketing duties. And a quote from, Mike Kuntz would have just said, we appreciate Don's 17 years of service here at Kings Island. We wish him and his family the best in future endeavors. Those kind of things always go. And then it just would have been a search for Don's replacement. We'll begin immediately. Just something short, brief to the point, very professional. And I think that's all that would have been needed if they'd have done something like that.
Do you think that they would have used that as an opportunity to sell silver passes?
Yeah, that would have been a great time to try to sell Silver Pass. No, but they didn't. Like I said, they didn't tell anybody. It wasn't. I'd been gone for 4 or 5 months. And some of the media people, I'd run into them at the Bengals game or something. They'd say, "How's things going to Kings Island?" I don't know. I don't work there anymore. Oh, really? So they didn't. They didn't. They kept that under wraps as much as they could. They knew that it was eventually going to get out to season pass holders and the coaster enthusiast groups, and then eventually it would make its way through the hallways, at Kings Island. But there was, in terms of me leaving and that, I mean, it wasn't, like I said, I was grateful for the opportunity. I can't say that enough. And um, they were, very professional in how they brought, it was very standard, professional, here's what we have to do. And here's the papers, can you sign right here? And there wasn't anything else about it. No hard feelings at all. I've Kings Island's been part of my, the fabric of my whole life. It always will be. I've been going there since 1972. So, nothing like that was ever going uh, to be a problem. I know when I first took the job there, one of my good friends, he works for the Cincinnati Reds. One of the things he said was, "Oh, I don't know, that's a good idea for Kings Island." I said, "Why not?" And he says, "You'll do a great job." And he says, "But always remember," he says, "whenever you hire a legend, remember one day you have to fire a legend." So he kind of reminded me of that. So I knew that day was eventually gonna come, when we were gonna part ways. But like I said, I was excited about the other things I was gonna get to do, gonna spend more time with my family. It's all been great. And as we touched on at the beginning of this episode, it certainly seems like a lot longer than 2 years ago, since I last worked there.
Well, Don, on behalf of your friends and family in the Kings Island and Tower Topics community, all the people watching at home, everybody on YouTube, our friends at Podbean, StreamYard, our friends at ChatGPT. We want to wish you a happy anniversary.
Well, thank you. It means a lot, Ryan.
All right. Let's move on to a segment we like to call Buy or Sell.
All right, Ryan, are you buying or are you selling? All right, we have the new for 2026 Family Thrill Ride planned for Kings Island. It'll be delayed until 2027.
I am going to buy. I think that they're probably, if they can get out of doing something for 2026, they're going to do that. They need to save the money. We're going to do an episode on it saying like, oh, that family thrill that was promised, we're not going to get. And then you're going to get park apologists say they never announced they were getting it. You're just assuming. Well, they did. Corporate announced it.
They did announce it. And yeah, so you're buying. Okay.
What about you?
Do you have any like particular reason why you're buying though?
I think that the cost cutting measures are going to be even more extreme. And I think that's about as extreme as it gets in terms of something that they plan to do that they base their marketing on and stuff that they're just not going to do. The old Six Flags would do things like that. There was like whatever that Gotham City dark ride is, they were going to add to one of their parks, and they announced it and everything. And about halfway through the winter, they're like, you know what? We're not doing that. Again, this isn't the same management or anything, but it's not unheard of to be done. But I think it'll either be delayed to 27 or just canceled entirely.
Okay. Well, I'm also going to buy, and what I'm going to base that on is you look down the list of what was announced for all the different parks in the chain for 2026, and then you look at all the parks and you don't see any activity going on that would need to be going on if some of these rides that were going to go into these parks were going to be ready for 2026. So what Kings Island was going to get did not look to be like a big, massive type of project. So you wouldn't need to see construction today on it. Mm-hmm. But I do think that, there's a lot elsewhere in the company that would point to, this may not be happening. And I still hope it does. But if I had to pick one or the other, buy or sell, I'm going to buy.
You're going to buy that it is delayed till 27. I think that's what they're saying.
2027, yes, I will buy that.
All right. We'll be back with a brand new segment called Hot Takes. And I want to give a special shout out to my friend Katie, who made me switch from the match burning graphic or from a burning arrow graphic to a match burning graphic because she thought that my burning arrow looked like a burning toilet plunger. So you can thank Katie for that one. Don, your hot take.
Well, my hot take is we mentioned earlier this year that we were going to go around the park and try the different chicken tenders and that. But one of our listeners, and he follows us on X, Kevin Cavanaugh, he had recommended that I try the chicken tenders at Grain and Grill. And I gave it a shot. He had it, in front of him. We were sitting at a table when I asked him how they were and stuff, and it looked really good. So I tried it, and not only was it good, but I thought that was one of the best meals I've ever had at the park. I think it's pushing the pub burger as a go-to item for me if it's consistent like this all the time. I mean, it was 3, really big pieces, for the chicken tenders. The mac and cheese was really good. I was really impressed with it. Some of my past experience at Grain and Grill was, it was okay, but it wasn't something I felt that I had to go back and get again. The chicken tenders, I'm going to go back and get it again. So my hot take is this is, something that if you have not tried the chicken tenders from Grain and Grill during a visit to Kings Island this year, what are you waiting for? Go give it a try. I think you'll be impressed just like I was.
Nice. Let's move on to some theme park headline news. All right, the Walt Disney World could still eventually become home of a 5th major theme park. That's outlined in the newly adopted Comprehensive Plan 2045 from the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, which reserves development capacity for a new major theme park and 2 additional minor parks over the next 2 decades. While Disney has not announced any plans to build a 5th gate, the language in the plan indicates the possibility remains on the table. The district's long-term land use and infrastructure policies are designed to support the development of a large-scale park, which Disney decide to move forward. We had Dennis Spiegel on the show, and he was a big proponent of it. He was saying that they were going to have to do that. With Epic Universe, they were going to have to.
Yeah, I don't think it's a question of if they're going to add a 5th park. It's just a question of when they're going to add a 5th park.
Yeah, that's exciting. I wonder what the theme would be. I guess we never know, but here we are, But that's 2045.
I think you're looking at probably 5-7 years off before you would even
have an
probably see, things taking shape, an announcement and all that.
Yeah. Right. We'll be right back with the listener questions. First listener question, Norman from Cincinnati. He said, who dropped the ball at Kings Island? The new shirt designs are absolutely terrible. Nothing but awful AI-generated designs for Banshee, Diamond Mystic, and worst of all, Orion. Not only is the Orion design poor quality, but it also features the wrong Orion. The shirt being sold at the Cedar Fair merch shop depicts Orion from Greek mythology, the giant hunter known for his many love affairs. It shows the Greek god Orion holding a sword and shield. From my understanding, Orion is themed around space exploration, connecting to the real-world NASA Orion spacecraft program and the constellation Orion, which is why it fits so well with Area 72. A quick Google search reveals that the Orion roller coaster at Kings Island is themed around space exploration and a mission to find a new home for humanity. Riders are cast as recruits on a mission to travel through a meteor storm and reach a planet within the Orion constellation. I noticed this mistake last year, but now I see kids at the park walking around with AI-themed Greek mythology Orion shirts, and it just doesn't sit right with me. It's not just Kings Island. I visited Cedar Point this Memorial Day and saw many AI coaster shirts there as well. Was this just laziness or incompetence? I don't know. Where do we begin?
Where do we begin exactly? And I have seen those shirts, and you're right. That is a total disconnect. Has nothing to do with what the plan theming was for Orion. I've been a little disappointed when I've gone to the gift shops and have seen some of the designs and that they have this year. There are a couple of good ones, but for the most part, just very generic. What you can get at Kings Island, you can get at Cedar Point. Same kind of design. They just changed the name on it and stuff. And it's definitely, to me, it's taken a step back this year from where merchandise was pre-merger.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't have a problem with that. Orion, the constellation, is paying tribute to Orion, the Greek god, from what I understand. So I don't understand why they can't do both. I mean, look, the Columbus Blue Jackets are both like Civil War and bees. Like they play both sides of the fence. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I kind of like the merch this year. I like the simple stuff where it's just the logo or whatever. So I'm kind of different, but I don't know. I bet you're going to see more and more AI stuff though. So if you don't like it, you might as well stop shopping there.
That just tells me that they've scaled back on the merch teams and those that are involved with the buying and everything that had been there before. That's taken out of their hands, and now it's just like you said, being just very generic, generated that way.
Yeah. Next question, Jason from DeWitt, Iowa. He said, "Hi Don, absolutely appreciate you guys and all you do for the show and KI. I have a couple questions for you. Have you guys ever done or will you do an episode on CP versus KI with a truly honest comparison between the two parks? My family and I have been to both parks, but honestly, KI is our home park and hands down the favorite place in the world. However, KI obviously isn't great at everything, and neither is CP. It would be great to hear a comparison of the two." Second question. With the knowledge between you and Ryan, could you guys do a deep dive into how the theme park industry works? With the cost synergies of the merger, I think it would be interesting to learn how the industry works. Okay, one more question. I love the episode on KI versus KD. We're going to KD for the first time in a couple weeks. What are your must-dos while riding at KD? Again, thank you and Ryan for the great show. I just recently upgraded Prestige. Well, thank you for being Prestige. Don, I'm going to recap a little bit. His first question is, would we ever do Cedar Point versus Kings Island, like a comparison?
Yes, we would, and you'll hear that episode sooner than later.
Sooner than later. Okay. Um, could we do a deep dive into how the industry works? And he's asking specifically about cost synergies of the merger. I think we should do an
Yes, we
episode
could
on.
dive into that a little bit.
Well, I think we should do an episode on what cost synergies are,
Yeah.
because we throw it around like it's a joke, but we could talk about what their intention was. I think that would be a good idea for an episode.
Yeah, I think we want to give listeners and that Kings Island fans a little bit of a break from cost synergies because they're experiencing it firsthand when they're out in the park. So we'll wait a little bit for that, but maybe at some point in August we'll do that.
What are some must-dos at King's Dominion?
Everything. You got to see the singing mushrooms. I mean, that's priority number one. You got to do that. I think Rapterra is an excellent wing coaster. You got to try that. Dominator, great ride. Grizzly, running amazing. Wooden roller coaster. The track work that the Gravity Group on that, breathed new life into it. For me, it's top 15 wooden coaster, that I've been on. I love that ride. So those are some of the must dos for me.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, their Giga Coaster, whatever they call it now.
Racer 75 is another one. You got to do that.
Right.
You'll be able to compare it to the Racer at Kings Island. The similarities are different.
Sure. Barry from Wapakoneta, Ohio. Which, fun fact, birthplace of the first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong. You pass it on the way to Cedar Point if you live in around Cincinnati. He said, what's the reason the Beast hasn't been RMC'd? An RMC Beast would put Kings Island on the map.
Seriously? You only would look to do something like that if you have a problem coaster. The Beast has not been a problem coaster. It won't be. The park takes care of it. So I think people that keep wishing for that, wanting that, I think they need to turn the page. Not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, it would make a cool RMC, but it would be at a heck of a cost. Let's be honest here. Okay. Terry from Centerville, Ohio. He said, Don, did you appear on the Ken Kettering show in Dayton many moons ago? I was a production assistant on that show.
Ken Kettering show. Yes, I did. It was an afternoon show around noon, I guess at noon to 1 or something that was shown in the Dayton area. I did appear on that. I was on with two other people from Kings Island. There was an entertainer from one of the shows. I remember her name was Chris Hartle, very talented singer. So she talked about, the live entertainment. I talked about the rides at Kings Island. And then we had another woman that came. She was involved with the wild animal habitat. So she came to talk about all the different animals that, you could see when you experience that. And she brought a couple of them in the studio with her. So yes, I was on the Ken Kettering show. That question definitely rekindled some memories. So I think it was like 1987, 88 range.
Yeah. Very cool. Thanks for the question. And if you want to submit your questions, send them to Don. Don Helbig at themeparksbydon.com. Your first name, the city you're from, and your question, concern, comment. We'd love to hear it. Don't do
it. Just copy and paste it right into the document.
Exactly. Or you can send us to a direct message at Tower_Topics on X. While you're there, give us a follow. Don, tell us about the t-shirts.
Tower Topics t-shirts. They're available in a wicked green color, $22. Any size that you want. If you're interested in one, those email that Ryan just gave, Don Helbig at themeparksbydon.com. I just put TT in the subject line, your first name, last name, your mailing address, what size you need, and then I'll send you the QR code. Once the transaction goes through, you will get your shirt in just a matter of days. But we have other items too. We have what are these vinyl stickers. Those have done very, very well. So if you're interested in one of those, we have the stickers in a couple of different sizes here. Let me pull that up here. There's 4.5 inch by 3 inch. Those are ideal for like tumblers and water bottles. They're $5. That includes your shipping price. And we have 6.5 inch by 4 inch, $7 each. Those are the kind that you'd want to put like on your car windows. But these are great for any kind of hard surface. So if you want one of those too, same email, Don Helbig at themeparksbydon.com. Or you can also just go to our X, which is Tower_Topics, and just send us a direct message there. And the same thing, we'll send you the QR code, and we'll get you these items.
And while you're messing around with the internet machine, search for Tower Topics Facebook group on Facebook. We love that community, and it's a good way to stay updated with the show.
That's right.
All right.